If I have a thought in my mind, I said, boy, I'm going to star in a movie or star in a television series in America.
For 50 years, one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Asia stayed completely silent about the most famous death in Hong Kong history. Then, an old man with eagle tattoos on his chest and dragons on his back decided the truth had waited long enough. What he said did not just answer a question. It destroyed the most widely believed conspiracy theory of the last half-century. And what replaced it is far more disturbing. The death that shook a city. Let us start with the most recent development, because it changes everything that came before it. In 2020, a video began circulating quietly on YouTube. It was not polished. It was not dramatic. It was just an old man sitting in a chair, speaking plainly in Cantonese about something he had refused to discuss for decades. His name was Chan Wai-man, and what made his words remarkable was not just what he said. It was who he was when he said it. Chan Wai-man was not a retired schoolteacher offering a theory. He was a former double-flower red pole in the 14K Triad, one of the most powerful criminal organizations in all of Asia, with over 20,000 members at its height. He had controlled the Tsim Sha Tsui territory in Kowloon, an area overflowing with clubs, theaters, film studios, and criminal money. He had personally known Bruce Lee since they were children, sharing the same streets of Hong Kong. And for 50 years, he had said absolutely nothing publicly about what he knew. Then, he finally spoke. He said clearly and without hesitation, nobody in the Triad Society dared to touch Bruce Lee. He left no room for ambiguity. He did not say it was unlikely. He did not say he had no information. He said it was impossible. Bruce Lee had won the respect of Hong Kong people, including Triad members. There was no grudge against him, and nobody, not a single person with any standing in the underworld, would have dared to make a move against him. When a man who spent his adult life inside one of Asia's most violent criminal organizations tells you that organization had nothing to do with a famous death, and when that man had every reason to stay silent but chose to speak anyway, that carries weight that no book, no tabloid, and no documentary had ever been able to provide before. But to understand why his words matter so much, you need to understand what Hong Kong actually believed for 50 years. And to understand that, you need to go back to the night of July 20th, 1973. It was the hottest day of the month in Hong Kong, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity at 84%, the kind of heat that makes the city feel like it is slowly suffocating itself. Bruce Lee was 32 years old. He was not just famous in Hong Kong, he was a phenomenon. His film The Big Boss had shattered every box office record in Asia. His follow-up Fist of Fury had broken those records again. Enter the Dragon, his first Hollywood co-production with Warner Brothers, had just finished filming and was about to be released worldwide. He was weeks away from becoming the most famous martial artist,
and sitting with me is a man who's so quick the cameraman's got to chase him, Bruce Lee,
in the history of cinema. That morning, he typed a letter to his American attorney about a multi-picture offer from Warner Brothers and a proposed Hanna-Barbera animated series. He met with Australian actor George Lazenby at Golden Harvest Studios to discuss casting in a new film. He was building something enormous, and he knew it. By early afternoon, he was at the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei at 67 Beacon Hill Road in Kowloon Tong. His producer, Raymond Chow, arrived later in the day. They were discussing the script for Game of Death, a film Bruce was developing with an ambition that no martial arts movie had attempted before. At some point in the early evening, Bruce complained of a headache. Betty offered him one of her prescription pills, a common painkiller called Equagesic. Bruce had taken it before without any problem. He swallowed the pill, walked into Betty's bedroom, lay down on the mattress, and closed the door. He never opened it again. When Betty tried to wake him 2 hours later, she could not. When Raymond Chow arrived and found him, he understood immediately that something had gone catastrophically wrong. By the time ambulance number 40 arrived and paramedics attempted to revive Bruce Lee on the drive to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, it was already too late. Bruce Lee was declared dead at 11:30 that night, and the first lie was told within hours. Golden Harvest released an official statement saying that Bruce Lee had collapsed while walking in his garden at home with his wife, Linda. That statement was completely false. He had died in his mistress's apartment. The cover story held for 3 days until a journalist named H.S. Chow traced the ambulance log and discovered that ambulance number 40 had picked up a patient from 67 Beacon Hill Road, not from Bruce Lee's home at 41 Cumberland Road. The lie collapsed, and in a city already shaped by distrust of authority, corruption, and the visible hand of organized crime, the cover-up felt like confirmation of something near darker. But the cover-up that started that night would eventually be answered by a man who had been alive during it. And what he said 50 years later forced everyone to reconsider everything. Before we go any further, you need to understand the world that produced both Bruce Lee and Chan Wai-man. Because without that context, nothing that follows will make complete sense. The world that made Bruce Lee dangerous. Hong Kong in 1973 was not a city at peace with itself. Just 6 weeks before Bruce Lee died, a senior police superintendent named Peter Godber had quietly fled to Britain. He had accumulated over 4 million Hong Kong dollars in assets against a lifetime of official police earnings.
Officials were puzzled at how Godber amassed $4 million in foreign bank accounts
That could never have explained that figure. He had built a corruption empire where bribes flowed upward through the police hierarchy like water finding its level. And he was not unusual. He was simply the one who got caught.
51 people, including 10 policemen, died in the violence.
The Independent Commission Against Corruption, the body that would eventually transform Hong Kong into one of the least corrupt cities in Asia, did not yet exist in July of 1973. It would not be established until February of 1974. Before that, an estimated 35% of Chinese police officers were believed to have active Triad connections. Bribery was not a crime that people reported. It was a system that people navigated. The film industry sat at the center of this pressure. Money from criminal organizations flowed into productions as hidden financing. Studios accepted this because refusing it meant violence, sabotage, or financial collapse. Contracts between actors and studios were often enforced not by lawyers, but by the kind of men who did not need to raise their voice to make a point. Raymond Chow had broken from Shaw Brothers in 1970 to found Golden Harvest with a revolutionary model. He offered creative freedom, profit sharing, and independent production arrangements. This was genuinely disruptive to a system built on control. Shaw Brothers had operated like a studio from the classical Hollywood era, with actors on fixed salaries, no creative input, and long-term contracts that gave them no exit. Chow's model changed the power relationship. Bruce Lee walked into this environment and immediately made enemies. He demanded creative control over his scripts and fight choreography. He refused to perform sequences he thought looked fake or weak. He publicly challenged unsafe conditions on set. He formed his own production company, Concord Productions,
He's a film actor here in Hong Kong, so what does he choose, the East or the West?
with Raymond Chow, which put him on equal footing as a partner rather than as an employee. For a system built on the assumption that actors obeyed and producers controlled, this behavior was genuinely threatening. His relationship with director Lo Wei had collapsed into open hostility. Lo Wei publicly claimed credit for Bruce Lee's screen technique, saying that Lee didn't know how to fight on camera before Lo taught him. That statement enraged Bruce Lee in a way that went beyond professional ego. On July 10, 1973, just 10 days before his death, Bruce Lee confronted Lo Wei at Golden Harvest Studios. The confrontation escalated until Bruce unsheathed a knife hidden in his belt buckle, pointed it at Lo Wei, and asked him directly whether he believed Bruce could kill him with it. Lo Wei called the police. The knife disappeared. The confrontation was buried. 10 days later, Bruce Lee was dead. In a city where powerful men disappeared under convenient circumstances, where authority lied publicly about basic facts, and where the line between the film industry and organized crime was almost invisible. That sequence of events felt like a message to a lot of people, and that feeling was exactly why one man's silence became the most important silence in Hong Kong for 50 years. The man who walked between worlds. Chan Wai-man was born in 1945 in Guangzhou, in the Baiyun district, in a village called Changban. His family was working class. His father was a sailor. When Chan was 7 years old, the family moved to Hong Kong and settled in Sam Tung Uk village in Tsuen Wan, in the New Territories. At 12 years old, he was working in a spinning mill to support his family. He discovered martial arts around the same age and spent the following years training in Northern Shaolin boxing, Tam family, 3 extension fist, Western-style boxing, and eventually Muay Thai. He did not train as a hobby or for fitness. He trained because the streets of working-class Hong Kong in the 1950s and 1960s did not reward weakness. At 17, he became a correctional officer at Chi Ma Wan Prison and then at Shek Pik Children's Reformatory on Lantau Island. He later transferred to the Royal Hong Kong Police, where he worked at 3 different stations, including an assignment on the anti-narcotics squad. That work placed him directly at the intersection of law enforcement and organized crime, in an era when that intersection was barely visible from the outside. He was eventually expelled from the police because of his Triad connections. He had joined the 14K Triad during his time in law enforcement. The 14K was founded in 1945 by a Kuomintang general as an anti-communist action group. By the 1970s, it had evolved into one of the 2 dominant criminal organizations in Hong Kong with approximately 20,000 members, a complex hierarchy, and control over neighborhoods, entertainment venues, substance distribution networks, and significant portions of the film industry. In 1970 and 1971, he won the Southeast Asian Martial Arts Combat Competition in consecutive years. That victory changed everything for him professionally. He was no longer only a feared criminal enforcer. He was a legitimate champion athlete, and that reputation opened doors into a world he had observed from the outside, the world of Hong Kong cinema. His first film was Love and Blood in 1972. Over the following 3 decades, he appeared in more than 167 films. He worked with Jackie Chan on Project A Part 2 in 1987. He worked with Brandon Lee on Legacy of Rage in 1986. He predominantly played villains, gangsters, and triad bosses, roles that required no performance research because they drew from direct personal experience. And throughout all of it, people in Hong Kong whispered a saying about him and Bruce Lee. The saying went, "Legs belong to Bruce Lee. Fists belong to Chan Wai-man." They had been close since their school days. They shared a passion for fighting arts. Bruce Lee reportedly gave Chan the nickname Street Fighter. Chan would later describe Bruce Lee's physical abilities in terms that came from genuine experience rather than fan admiration. He said flatly that no one in Southeast Asia could match Bruce Lee, and that in a street fight with no rules, he would bet everything on Bruce winning against any opponent.
Bruce never fight in the ring, but I did. However, I used to witness Bruce sparring many people.
That was the man who, for 50 years, refused to say a single public word about what happened on July 20th, 1973. And that silence had a reason. Because the truth about what he knew was more complicated than anyone expected. The unspoken rule that protected Bruce Lee. Here is the part of this story that almost nobody talks about, and it is arguably the most important part. Bruce Lee was not protected from organized crime because he was a good fighter. He was protected because of a calculation so obvious that the people inside the criminal world did not even need to state it out loud. By 1972, Bruce Lee was not just a movie star. He was a cultural symbol of a scale that Hong Kong had never produced before. Chinese audiences had spent decades watching Western films portray Asian men as comical, servile, or invisible. Bruce Lee appeared on screen and reversed that completely. He was powerful, confident, intelligent, and utterly unapologetic about all of it. He did not ask for Western approval. He did not soften himself for foreign audiences. He simply was what he was and dared anyone to argue with it. This gave him a form of protection that nobody could replicate. Harming Bruce Lee would have triggered an explosion of public grief and outrage on a scale that would have brought immediate police scrutiny, international press attention, and political pressure in a city that was already being watched closely by the British colonial government. In 1973, Hong Kong was still rebuilding public trust after the catastrophic corruption scandals and the 1967 riots. The criminal organizations understood that certain actions were simply too visible, too public, and too costly to be worth any business advantage they might have gained. Chan Wai-man had sparred informally with Bruce Lee, and he described those experiences with a directness that felt more honest than the reverence most people used when talking about Lee. He said Bruce moved faster than anything he had ever encountered. He said his mind could not keep up with what his body was receiving. He said Bruce did not strike to impress. He struck to end things. That level of genuine respect, earned in physical exchange rather than observed from a distance, created a different kind of bond than celebrity admiration. So, the unspoken rule held. No Triad group would act against Bruce Lee. No individual within the criminal world would have survived ordering it. That rule held perfectly. And then, Bruce Lee died anyway. Then the question was no longer simply what killed Bruce Lee. The question was, who was hiding what happened at the time of his death, and why? The answer that the streets landed on was the Triads. And for 50 years, nobody in a position to know had publicly said otherwise. Until Chan Wai-man sat down in front of a camera. 50 years of silence, broken in a single sentence. After Bruce Lee died, Chan Wai-man continued his life on both sides of the line that separated the criminal world from the entertainment industry. He appeared in over 167 films across 3 decades. He played gangsters and enforcers and killers, roles that required nothing from him except to be exactly what he actually was. He worked with Jackie Chan, with Jet Li, with Brandon Lee. He built a reputation as one of Hong Kong cinema's most reliably authentic presences in crime films, precisely because every director who hired him understood that Chan Wai-man was not performing anything. And through all of it, whenever the conversation turned to Bruce Lee's death, Chan said nothing. In the years after 1973, the rumors never stopped. Every few years, a new book, a new documentary, or a new tabloid exposé would resurrect the Triad theory. Tom Bleecker, who had briefly been married to Linda Lee, published a book in 1996 called Unsettled Matters that described, without evidence, Bruce Lee being pressured by organized crime figures in the final months of his life. Alex Ben Block had proposed as early as 1974 that ninja assassins or martial arts experts, angry about Bruce Lee sharing kung fu secrets, had killed him using a delayed death technique. The dim mak theory, the idea that a master could strike a fatal blow whose effects only appeared hours or days later, circulated in martial arts communities for years. None of these theories came from anyone who had actually been inside the criminal world of 1970s Hong Kong. Chan Wai-man had, and he stayed silent. When he spoke, he did not show reluctance. He did not construct a dramatic revelation. He simply stated what he knew as plainly as he had always stated things. He went further in other interviews. He described Bruce Lee's physical capabilities not with the reverence of a fan, but with the honest assessment of a man who had tested himself against real fighters his entire life. He said that in any unregulated street confrontation, Bruce Lee would have defeated any opponent he could name. He said the only man in Southeast Asia he would have hesitated to call the best was Bruce Lee himself, and that hesitation was not about ability, but about the rules of competition. He spoke about other things, too. He spoke about Brandon Lee, with a bluntness that was at times deeply uncomfortable. He described bringing Brandon to Japan for a film project, growing frustrated with Brandon's behavior on set, and eventually slapping him. He claimed, controversially, that Brandon's death on the set of The Crow in 1993 was not an accident. The official investigation concluded it was negligence.
The Crow was close to being a doomed movie after star Brandon Lee was killed in a handgun accident.
Chan's claim has no supporting evidence and contradicts the findings of the North Carolina District Attorney's Office. But the Bruce Lee statement was different. Chan had nothing to gain from it. He was not promoting a book. He was not building a narrative that benefited him personally. He was simply a very old man with a very long memory, correcting a lie that had been repeated for 50 years. The lie was that organized crime killed Bruce Lee. The truth, as Chan confirmed from inside the criminal world that supposedly committed the crime, was that organized crime had nothing to do with it. Which leaves one final question. If not the Triads, then what actually killed Bruce Lee? And the answer, confirmed by a peer-reviewed medical journal in 2022, is something that nobody in 1973 was equipped to diagnose. The medical truth that was harder to accept than murder. In December 2022, a paper was published in the Clinical Kidney Journal titled simply, "Who Killed Bruce Lee? The Hyponatremia Hypothesis." The authors were nephrologists, kidney specialists from the IYS Fundación Jiménez Díaz at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. They had spent significant time analyzing every publicly available account of Bruce Lee's physical condition, his habits, his medical history, and the circumstances of his death. Their conclusion was not based on speculation. It was based on medical reasoning from documented facts. They proposed that Bruce Lee died from hyponatremia, a condition in which the sodium levels in the blood drop below the threshold required to maintain basic neurological function. When sodium drops far enough, the brain begins to swell. When the brain swells inside a rigid skull with nowhere to expand, the result is cerebral edema. Cerebral edema is exactly what the autopsy found. Bruce Lee's brain weighed 1,575 grams at the time of death. A normal brain weighs up to 1,400 grams. His had swollen by 12.5%. Hyponatremia is not exotic. It is not rare. It is a condition well documented in endurance athletes, military recruits, marathon runners, and anyone who consumes large amounts of water faster than their kidneys can process it. At least 12 confirmed public deaths from exercise-associated hyponatremia have been documented since 1985. The Madrid researchers pointed out that Bruce Lee had not one risk factor for this condition. He had multiple, stacked simultaneously, in the months before his death. His body fat was estimated at 5 to 6% during the filming of Enter the Dragon. At 135 pounds and 5 foot 7 inches, he was already operating at the absolute physiological edge of leanness. His doctor, Dr. Peter Wu, had explicitly warned him that his extremely low body fat percentage made him vulnerable to substances and physical stress in ways that a healthier body composition would not. In the months before his death, Bruce Lee had shifted almost entirely to a liquid diet. Linda Lee confirmed to biographer Matthew Polly that Bruce had stopped eating solid food and was surviving primarily on carrot and apple juice. Medically, this created what is called a low-solute diet, and it is one of the most reliable ways to impair the kidney's ability to excrete excess water. When your kidneys have insufficient solute available to create concentrated urine, they lose the ability to remove water efficiently, even when your body desperately needs them to. Bruce Lee was also taking multiple prescription medications simultaneously. He had been prescribed phenytoin, an anti-epileptic, after his May collapse. Phenytoin is associated with an almost 5-fold increase in the risk of hospitalization for hyponatremia. he had been taking diloxine, an opioid-based painkiller which promotes the secretion of antidiuretic hormone, meaning the body retains water rather than releasing it. And on the night of his death, he took Equagesic, which contained aspirin, an NSAID that further impairs the kidney's ability to regulate fluid balance. He used cannabis regularly. On the day of his death, he had used it at the studio and almost certainly again at Betty's apartment. Cannabis increases thirst, which drives greater water consumption, directly worsening hyponatremia in someone whose kidneys are already compromised. He had reportedly had his axillary sweat glands surgically removed the previous year because he thought visible perspiration looked bad on camera. Multiple people who knew him confirmed this, including Betty Ting Pei and Raymond Chow. This altered his thermoregulatory capacity in ways that increased physical stress during exertion. And 2 months before his death, his body had already sent an unmistakable warning. On May 10, 1973, during a dubbing session at Golden Harvest Studios, where the air conditioning had been turned off for sound quality, Bruce Lee had collapsed with a high fever, convulsions, and loss of consciousness. He was taken to Hong Kong Baptist Hospital, where his BUN, the blood urea nitrogen level measuring kidney function, was 92 milligrams per deciliter. Normal is between 7 and 20. He had acute kidney injury. He was treated with mannitol to reduce the brain swelling that was already occurring, and the treatment saved his life. Doctors told him directly that he needed to slow down, reduce stress, and change his physical habits. They explained that what had happened could happen again and could be fatal the next time. Bruce Lee heard those words and returned to exactly the same life. He trained the same way. He ate the same way. He took the same medications. He continued the same routines. He acted out fight scenes with the same physical intensity on the hottest day of July. And then he lay down in a bedroom with the door closed, and his brain swelled for the second time. And this time, there was no mannitol and no doctor nearby. The Madrid researchers concluded their paper with a line that was either poetic or devastating, depending on your perspective. They wrote, "Bruce Lee made famous the quote, 'Be water, my friend,' but excess water appears to have ultimately killed him." The paper was an editorial comment rather than original clinical research. No blood sodium levels were ever actually measured during Bruce Lee's final hours or at autopsy. The hyponatremia diagnosis is entirely retrospective and inferential. The official cause of death remains death by misadventure due to cerebral edema attributed to hypersensitivity to Equagesic. But here is the honest summary of where the evidence points in 2025. The Triad theory has now been denied by a former senior Triad figure with direct knowledge of the criminal world in 1970 Hong Kong, who had no reason to lie and had waited 50 years before speaking. The Debunking theory has no scientific basis whatsoever and was invented by a journalist in 1974 to sell books. The Equagesic allergy theory was rejected by the doctors present at the time and is contradicted by the fact that Bruce was symptomatic before he took the pill, and that the May collapse, which he was also absent from Equagesic, had presented identically. What remains is a portrait of a human body that was being pushed far beyond what any human body can sustain for long. A man who had removed the ability to sweat normally, who had stopped eating solid food, who was taking multiple substances that individually impaired kidney function and collectively created a catastrophic cascade, who had received an explicit warning 10 weeks earlier and chosen to ignore it, who trained for hours on the hottest day of the month, and who then lay down alone in a closed room with no one monitoring him while the process his body had been building toward for months quietly completed itself. Bruce Lee was not murdered. He was not assassinated. He was not betrayed by anyone who wished him harm. He was defeated by the same relentless drive that had made him extraordinary. He believed that limits were something other people encountered. He believed that discipline could override biology. He believed that slowing down meant losing control, and losing control was the one thing he had never been willing to accept. That belief produced the most physically capable human being that the martial arts world had ever witnessed. And it produced, in the end, a body that finally ran out of road. Chan Wai-man confirmed that no hand from the criminal world reached into that apartment on July 20th, 1973. The medical evidence confirms that no hand was needed. What killed Bruce Lee was the same thing that had defined his entire life: the absolute refusal to recognize that even the most extraordinary human being in any room is still a human being. The legend was enormous. The man behind it was real. And in the end, it was the man, not the legend, who ran out of time. If you have lived your whole life believing something different about how Bruce Lee died, drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation has been waiting 50 years to happen, and it is not finished yet.